more on kind of on the 60s, 70s, and 80s, more recent history. But there is so much of it here. It's a good deal of what is important about Orange County, where we all live and which we all love. So that's what I wanted to kind of pull together and share some ideas. Basically, the thing is, well, going back, as Sean mentioned at the beginning, every style which has come along has had its popularity when it's new, and then it's become old-fashioned and decayed. It isn't maintained. Victorians, like the great Haas Lilienthal House in San Francisco, or the Newport Pavilion as well. Victorian architecture. But as it is popular for a while, then it's tapered off, and it tapers off in interest. People think it's ugly, it's old-fashioned. They start to demolish them. We lose them. But inevitably, it's a cycle, inevitable cycle, interest in the style returns. And of course now Victorian houses are treasured and valuable, and people restore them and so forth. But the same thing happened with Art Deco as well. That's the Richfield building, which was one of the most beautiful Art Deco skyscrapers in Los Angeles. I was reading Kevin Lynch's book about the city, and it's an analysis, great urban analysis of how people perceive cities. But I noticed a throwaway line in that book where he was analyzing Los Angeles, and he talked about the ugly Richfield building. So around 1960, this was considered ugly, and of course, it's not there anymore. It was torn down. Other examples, the Craftsman style. The top is the 1902 Culbertson House by Green and Green, who are gods in Southern California, certainly. 1902, 1953, the new owners, the Dunns, decided they wanted to remodel it. And that's what the same house looks like. So even the Craftsman style. And thank you for the groans, I appreciate that. So just to make my point that there are these buildings and types which, though now we look at them and we say, yeah, that's not so great, that's ugly, get rid of it, it's okay, that's not historic. But I promise you that even styles that today are dismissed will return. And that's kind of what I'm trying to help with today. We're going to talk about a couple of different examples of 1960s, 70s, and 80s building types, which I would bet a lot of you will say, yeah, we could do without that. Like the mirrored glass office building. I mean, there's so many. Come on in, we've got room back there. Mirrored glass office buildings, there are business parks everywhere. There's so many of them. Why would those be important? Or the tract homes. This one happens to be in Irvine as well. But there are things about these styles that I want to talk about tonight with a couple of different types of building types. The office building to begin with, which is a signature style here in Orange County. This idea of a low-rise city with these nodes of high-rise offices. Come on in. There's room on the back. Are all, again, a part of Orange County. We have a number of really great buildings, though, and I think you've probably seen some of these, but I want to point some of these out. This office building across from John Wayne Airport. There are two, actually, right on either side of Michelson. And this was designed by Craig Elwood. Craig Elwood is one of the great mid-century modern architects who designed a number of case study houses, these beautiful, simple, minimalist steel and glass or wood and glass houses. He was very well known for that. But he also designed office buildings, including these two right here in the center of Orange County. You can see the simplicity of the steel structure expressed on right across from the entry to John Wayne Airport. Yeah. And they're twin, they're mirrored. If you stand at John Wayne and look at them, the high part, I don't know, 3 or 4 story, and then the low rise buildings, banks on either side. So they have that kind of classical symmetry to them, though they are definitely modern in style. Park Bernay also, this is also gone. This was right at Jamboree and the 405, where that big new neo-urbanist development is now. but again, classic mid-century modern, flat-roofed glass. The ornament is not traditional ornament. It comes in the details, the simplicity of the way the details are put together. This is one of my favorites down in Newport on Lido. This was a bank building with this great urban scale mural with these sunscreens. The sunscreens have been taken off now and the building has been remodeled. It still stands there. This was designed by Wenceslaus Sarmiento, who was a very interesting architect at a lot of banks. But he started his career working for Oscar Niemeyer, the great Brazilian modernist. And he was originally from Argentina, but he worked in Brazil, then came to the United States and designed a whole series of banks. Again, you would probably know his banks. They're all over the area, actually all over the Missouri on west. But his name is not as well known. But we have one of his buildings here. Of course, the Fleur building here in Irvine by Welton Beckett. We'll be talking a little bit about the mirrored glass buildings in just a bit. But as you can imagine, in the late 1960s when this was built, you know what Irvine looked like. There was nothing there. But then suddenly, right by the 405 freeway, was this extraordinary, huge structure for Fluor Corporation. It's very interesting. If you ever get a chance to go inside, it's palatial in its scale, royal in its scale, I'd have to say. Because Fluor Corporation at the time was a major construction company doing projects all around the world, like Bechtel, basically. And this headquarters, and they occupied all of the buildings, which have now been divided up into a lot of different companies. But they occupied the whole thing. It shows you kind of the power and the might of American ingenuity and engineering and the power of its businesses in this mid-century period of time. You still have the remnants of it, the monuments to that period. This is one of my favorites here in Orange County. This is the Hunt Food headquarters up in Fullerton, designed by William Pereira. Now, we're going to have quite a number of buildings by William Pereira. I like to call William Pereira the Baron Haussmann of Orange County. He keeps coming back. Baron Haussmann redesigned, rebuilt Paris in the 19th century. The Champs-Élysées, these long, beautiful boulevards with the neoclassical buildings on either side, clearing out slums and ghettos and so forth, and building this, what we now know of as Paris, this magnificent global city. But this is the headquarters of Hunt Foods. Norton Simon, very important figure in California, was the head of Hunt Foods at the time. And he selected, of course, William Pereira to design his headquarters. It is it's a modern building, flat roof, glass, steel, expression of the steel columns you can see. But notice how those columns are detailed. They become these T's that then support the roof and allow the open air penthouse, for example, to be inside of it. Notice also how it kind of floats above the ground on this flat platform, an idea that we'll see again at UC Irvine as well, another Pereira design. But again, Pereira did a lot. This is the Ford Aero Neutronics. Come on in, there's room back here if you'd like to come on through. Ford Aero Neutronics. This was on Jamboree at Ford Road, but it's still Ford Road. And it's all now housing as well. You can see, that's in the left-hand side, that's the back bay at the very top of the picture, just to kind of orient you that what looks like a dirt path, that's Jamboree in around 1960 when this was built. But what was it going to be? It was a high-tech aerospace research facility, and fairly extensive, as you can see, and definitely modern, definitely expressing the temper of the times, his interest in looking forward in modern engineering in this building. Again, William Pereira, the architect. Another Pereira building. I don't have many good slides of this, unfortunately. This was a Chrysler research center up in Anaheim. I don't know, does anybody remember this? It was right on the 5.
Yeah.
And it had
cars in the glass windows.
Yeah, and behind the glass windows there. But it had this most beautiful blue ceramic tile walls on it as well. Really a beautiful building. Now, of course, gone. Or this is still there. This is was originally designed for Rockwell, again by William Pereira. At the time, and this is in the 1960s, Orange County was rivaling Silicon Valley for the growth and development of the high-tech industry, especially aerospace down here. A bust in aerospace eventually caused Rockwell to sell this off, and it's down there in Laguna de Gel as this huge, almost white elephant, but it is an amazing structure. The pyramid structure is kind of interesting in terms of Pereira's career. You may know Geisel Library at UC San Diego, which is a pyramid upside down, like this. That is also William Pereira. Or the Pacific Mutual building at Fashion Island as well. William Pereira as well. And of course, the Irvine Company headquarters. Now, these are a couple of my favorite high-rises, certainly in Orange County or even in Southern California. They are modern, they're structurally expressive, but they are so beautifully detailed with this kind of egg crate screen on the wall, but then the building is lifted up, so the bulk of it is floating, and then it steps back at the top as well. Very simple and yet so beautifully done. And of course it does have the integrated artwork of animals, bas-reliefs of swordfish or cattle or other of our native flora and fauna.
Is that Millard Sheets?
No, it's Tom Van Sant.
Tom Van Sant,
Tom Van Sant.
I'm told. Thank you. I did not know. But you'll see his work around.
But he studied under Millard Sheets.
Really?
Yeah, he was at Otis, the original Otis.
Oh, good. We're going to get to Millard Sheets in just a little bit, but I'm glad to know the connection. This is the building up at the block in Orange. This is an office building, and it was designed by Minoru Yamasaki, who was the architect of course, the World Trade Center towers. And here we have a building of his right here in the center of Orange County. He was a major architect, really one of the rising stars in the architecture world, and certainly through the 50s and into the 60s. At some point in the 60s, his reputation in the architectural press began to slip. There was a bias against people who were playing around with modernism too much. People like Edward Durrell Stone, Minoru Yamasaki, William Pereira, Paul Rudolph as well, even Eros Saarinen. These architects, brilliant architects, were getting a little bit tired of the glass box. They started going in other directions, but there were some people who were insisting that we stay with a glass box, that was the ideal of modern architecture and we should not stray. Minoru Yamasaki. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of the mirrored glass office building, which we have a lot of here, and especially in the 70s. There is this very distinct aesthetic. The glass, we've had glass buildings mirrored in glass or framed or skinned in glass since the beginning of modern architecture. The idea of having a transparent, crystalline building was a very appealing one to modern architects. New material, using new structure, and having the glass all the way around it. But how do you do that? How do you frame those pieces of glass? And how do you make them stick to the building? And then how do you express it? Is a cube the only way, or can you have curves? Or, in the case of the 70s especially, the chamfer or the facet, this kind of crystalline, naturalistic form which was given to these buildings. And here are just a couple of examples right here in the Irvine area, where you can see that idea. The corners are cut off, but they're glass, they're shiny, they're reflective, they're crystalline in that way. There's some really great examples, and I have to thank my colleague Daniel Paul, who has an architectural historian in Los Angeles, who has really done the research on this type of architecture. He gives great tours also. But in the lower right-hand corner is one of the Cole Center office buildings with landscaping by Emmett Wemple. Oftentimes in these buildings, when you have reflective buildings, the landscape became a really important part of the design. And Emmett Wemple was one of the most influential landscape architects working here throughout the mid-century. Now, where did that idea of not just a cube of glass, but this shapely sort of glass came from? Well, Daniel says that this building was the Federal Aviation Administration building in Southgate, was really the first building designed to have the glass be a skin, a tight skin. Not like a building by Mies van der Rohe, where he broke up the glass with the exposed steel columns, which were the structure of the building. But instead, it's like you're stretching the glass around the building. And so you can give it different forms. You can shape it and you can curve it in different ways. Now, this is the very first building designed in that way. And so they didn't get all the details. I mean, they were still kind of experimenting. But it is interesting to note that the architect of this building, architects, were Caesar Pelli and Anthony Lumsden. Caesar Pelli especially is still working today as one of the primary global architects. And where did they get the idea? Well, they got it from this building. This is the General Motors Technical Center, opened in 1956 in Warren, Michigan. Come on in, there's room in the back. And a major advance for American and a modern architecture as well. You have General Motors, the biggest corporation of the times, incredibly advanced technologically and in research. And you have Eero Saarinen, the architect, working with them. Now, both Anthony Lumsden and Caesar Pelli and Kevin Roach and Robert Venturi and a number of other architects who went on to very famous careers were working with Eero Saarinen. But what Eero Saarinen did, he was absorbing information, looking for new ideas for the modern age. And he was working for General Motors. And so he said, you know your cars there in the lower left-hand corner, you've got these curving pieces of glass, and how do you make them stick to the car without popping out? Well, you have a neoprene gasket, which holds it tightly. It's a rubber, plastic sort of material. So Eero Saarinen said, let's use that. So he used neoprene gaskets in order to hold in every single one of those glass windows throughout the General Motors Technical Center. And they needed to refine this, but that's what Lumsden and Pelli used then in this building and a whole host of other buildings. The aesthetic possibilities of this use of glass, not just squared off, but at different angles, architects began to explore this. This is the Ambassador Grill at the United Nations Hotel in New York City. It was designed by Kevin Roach. Again, I worked with Eero Saarinen on the General Motors Technical Center. But look at this faceted kind of gem-like quality to this glass ceiling of this building, mirrored glass ceiling. I'm proud to say that this building has just been declared a New York City landmark. It's from the 1980s, fairly recent. It takes a lot of effort to get a building that new and on this kind of borderline of acceptance yet to be a landmark, but this just was a landmark. Caesar Pelli went in a different direction. He designed, for example, the Pacific Design Center here, opened in 1975, but using the same system of glass for this tight skin. But he said it doesn't have to be square. We can make it with all of these different sorts of shapes, and we can give it color as well. He was influenced by a number of different artists in sculptors in this, in the sense of transparency and color and so forth. But he translated it into this office building. The one last office building I want to talk about, is, because it's threatened now, is the Los Angeles Times Edition, downtown Los Angeles, by William Pereira. Proposal has just been made to tear this building down and build a high-rise tower on it. I'm working to try to save this because unfortunately, there is not much love for this style and this period of architecture. And yet, what I have come to the conclusion that the way that the composition of the horizontals and the verticals, the use of the darker color so it doesn't become too prominent over the building on the left, which is the old 1933 Gordon Kaufman LA Times building, which is a great, great monument. So Pereira was dealing with a number of both modern and urbanistic elements to design this building, which I think makes it worthwhile to keep in our cities. I want to run through a couple of apartments here in Orange County, in Irvine, in San Joaquin, and in the upper left-hand corner is some apartment buildings by Bakken, Aragonia, and Ross. Bill Watt was in charge of apartment buildings for the Irvine Company in the late 1960s and 1970s. And he was choosing some of the best multifamily architects working at that time, like Bakken, Aragonia, and Ross, to design these apartments in Irvine. Baywood, also, this is at San Joaquin and MacArthur, basically. Lower right-hand corner, you see how it looked originally. The landscape is, and I don't know who the landscape architect is, I apologize for that. But it has grown in beautifully. It's a beautifully landscaped and situated apartment complex. Or this one, which is at San Joaquin and Jamboree as well. And the landscaping here was by Lawrence Halprin. Lawrence Halprin was one of the primary mid-century modern landscape architects in the nation. And this is an early work of his, and we have it right here in Orange County. Or Promontory Apartments as well. That's Fisher Friedman, another San Francisco firm that was doing really good work. Or the Parkwood Apartments in the upper right-hand corner. This is by Frank Gehry, 1970. This is before he became Frank Gehry. But he had a very long and very important commercial career designing things like apartments. And this is at the corner of Michelson and Culver. But that's not all that he designed. Also the Bixby Green apartments up in Garden Grove. Frank Gehry designed these as well. Now, in some ways they look, and they're fairly typical townhouse apartments that you'll see anywhere, but there are definitely elements of the design, the arrangement, the detailing of these that you can see that something else is going on there. This is not just a schlock architect, whacking out yet one more apartment complex. The idea of the apartments had enough to interest somebody like Frank Gehry at that time. Now houses, boy, I could go on and on just about houses. We have so many really great individual houses, world class, literally. The Rudolph Schindler's Lovell House down in Newport on the left-hand side, or John Lautner's Rawlins House on Balboa Island as well. I mean, these are just extraordinary examples of the art of residential architecture. And I could talk about Bissell and Lorbach and Langworthy and any number of Orange County architects who did really wonderful custom designed homes. Orange County isn't given credit enough, I don't think, for all of that. But What I want to talk a little bit about is what mostly interests me, which is mass-produced housing.